Good afternoon. This is Jeff once again at the National Weather Service office here in Wakefield. This is the 2:30 p.m. update on the severe weather outbreak. I will be pushing up this briefing at 3 p.m. Just kind of update folks on where we are currently and what it looks like it's going to be going on and doing for the rest of this Monday afternoon and Monday evening. One thing I just will note that the tornado probability has decreased a little bit, especially across central Virginia, but the risk does remain. So we're going to make sure we talk about that. We are still in a moderate risk, level 4 out of 5. The Storm Prediction Center will be looking at this again this afternoon at around 4, and we'll see if they downgrade us a little bit here with the 4 p.m. update as far as the severe level risk. But right now we are still a level 4 out of 5. And so just kind of getting right into the risk, a lot of things remain unchanged. They've shaved a little bit, of their moderate risk out here in the west, but we still remain in a moderate to an enhanced risk across the rest of the area. The main threats still are basically strong gusty winds, some severe winds. Notice the tornado threat has decreased. We were in the orange category here earlier. We've decreased down into the yellow category. Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. Just means that the probability for some of the stronger tornadoes has decreased. Looking at what's currently going on out there right now, I'll tell you what, let's look at the current visible satellite image. And so what you see in here, I'll go ahead and play it here and maybe put it in motion here so we can kind of see what's going on here a little bit. And what you're going to notice is there are these areas of a little bit clearer weather, basically to our south. Let me make this a little bit bigger. And you can kind of see how all the clouds are streaming from, the south to the north. And obviously the puffier, brighter whites are where you see more of the thunderstorm activity. But you do still see these pockets where the sun is getting to the surface and it's heating things up. And so I'll go ahead and stop it here. And we'll move it forward in time. And so you can kind of see some thinner clouds here across parts of Hampton Roads and really a lot of northeast North Carolina. I'm here just off the coast. The skies are clear. And another area of some clearing weather kind of across central Virginia. So these are areas where the atmosphere is getting heated. And so creating a little bit more instability. And we'll have to see if that can kind of, trigger any additional storms as the evening and the afternoon go on. I will say the Morehead City did a weather balloon launch here at around 2 o'clock, and that sounding that we call it, it did pick up on quite a bit of instability as well as shear in the atmosphere, and they're kind of in that area where you would expect to see a little bit more unstable air. And the reason why that's important to talk about is I'll pull up the temperatures here. It is warmer down there. Temperatures down there across the Crystal Coast are right in the mid-70s. I actually have had some 75-degree readings, and so the air down here is a bit more unstable, and you do have that strong south and southeast wind, and so it's pushing some of that warmer air, kind of into the storms, and we'll see if the storms are able to feed on the amount of wind shear in the atmosphere. To do that, they're going to need some instability and some energy. So there is some energy out there. Also seeing some 70-degree readings here, and low 70s are starting to show up, right around just south of Raleigh where things are heating up. So there is some instability and heating out there. We're going to have to see if it's really going to be enough to try to get things going or not. So the Storm Prediction Center, right around 2 o'clock, did put us into what we call a mesoscale discussion. And it's kind of maybe hard to see it, but bottom line is they have kind of outlined all of northeast North Carolina, all of southeast Virginia, kind of going up 64 to Richmond, and then going back here, maybe back towards Lunenburg and back towards maybe right around western edge of Lake Gaston here. And so this red circle that you see that I'm kind of highlighting here, that's the area where the Storm Prediction Center is highlighting that as storms move north, things could become a little more unstable. There's a lot of shear in this area, and so we could realize some straight line wind damage and also maybe even a little bit of a tornado threat in this area. That's kind of the best area there. So really, it's mainly going to be from Richmond south and east and southeast across a lot of the southeastern, I'd say, maybe 4th of Virginia, and as well as into northeast North Carolina. So that's the risk that we're looking at here. I'd say from about, as of this recording at 2:30 this afternoon, up until about, let's say, about maybe 5, 6 o'clock. And then we're going to have the main line, the front coming in from the west. And we'll see what that's able to do here a little bit later. Looking at the radar on the bigger picture, what was going on as of 2:30. We had some storms move across parts of Hampton Roads. They had actually kind of moved up here up the bay, up towards the eastern shore. We had some more redevelopment here near Ahoskie that was moving up towards Hampton Roads. And the bigger area of thunderstorms, really once you get south of the Roanoke River, basically just north and east of Greenville, and that kind of extends all the way back here to Jacksonville and areas just west of Wilmington. So all this is streaming to the northeast. You do have some warmer air just here over the Pamlico Sound. And it's kind of basically got southeast winds feeding into these storms. So as this stuff races north, we'll have to kind of see what actually happens and how much the storms are able to tap that energy. As of about 2 o'clock this afternoon, this was the analysis as far as the amount of instability in the atmosphere. And so again, you can see the Arabian bullseye here where we do have the most instability, or what we call energy in the atmosphere. Again, Morehead City, north all the way up into southeast Virginia, kind of following up to James and the York River here, almost to Richmond. And again, that's where we have the best energy in the atmosphere right now. So that's what we would expect. It makes sense. This is the energy feeding into those storms. So we're going to have to watch out and see how that plays out. As we kind of do a little model prediction into the future, a couple hours from now, let me get that back over there. It does suggest, let's see if it'll stay. It doesn't seem to want to stay on me here. Anyway, a couple hours from now, you can kind of see how the instability kind of spreads across parts of southeast Virginia, a little bit further up into the peninsulas, but just kind of suggesting that the area is going to remain a little bit unstable. About 4 hours from now, about 6 o'clock, you're still seeing some instability there. It does not want to hold. There you go. You're still seeing some instability there across parts of southeast Virginia, mainly again, Richmond, south and east, to some instability. And it does decrease some, but it is showing there is some instability there at that time. And then you go for even further out in time, and obviously we lose our instability after the cold front comes through, things become stable, not much more of an issue at all. Looking at the amount of shear in the atmosphere, that kind of gives us a little idea of the rotation. There's been plenty of shear in the atmosphere. Basically still over kind of southeast and eastern Virginia. Moving through time, that shear kind of remains in place over southeast Virginia. See how the shear is increasing along that front to the west. Kind of see that blue there coming across Roanoke. That's the front coming through. Wind shear about 4 hours from now. Notice how that wind shear increases along the front right as it starts to push into central Virginia, and still a lot of wind shear kind of over southeast Virginia. And this is wind shear in the low levels of the atmosphere. And then about, we say 6 hours from now, so this is about 8 o'clock this evening, you see all the shear there in the east, and that's that front getting to the coast. So it's just telling you there's a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere. It doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be tornadoes. It's just telling you there's a lot of wind shear in the atmosphere, which is what we would expect. And that's why we have that wind threat coupled with that isolated tornado threat. Continuing on with the science here, which helps us kind of explain the threat. This is the amount of energy in the atmosphere, and this was as of about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So again, the area is in blue. You've got some instability there, just enough to kind of get some good storms going. And kind of going through in time, we keep that instability kind of there across southeast Virginia. The bright pinks is about what we call 1,000 joules, but kind of this area here where that Storm Prediction Center is highlighted, you kind of see the bright pinks and the blues. This is the area where we're going to have the best instability. And this is about 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's still there. Still have some instability about, it's 5 and then 6 o'clock. But the instability does kind of decrease a little bit as you start to get towards 6, 7 o'clock. Notice how the instability increases just a teeny bit right around 8 o'clock as that front starts to come through. You get some of these brighter pinks in here. Then once the front blows through, we lose our instability and we lose that energy in the atmosphere. One of the things we've also been kind of targeting and kind of talking about is this significant tornado parameter. It tries to combine the shear in the atmosphere with the instability, but it's really keying on the shear. And you see here at 2 o'clock, we've had some rotating storms this afternoon. Nothing's really been able to maintain itself. It's probably the shear actually tearing the storms apart. They try to spin and they get kind of ripped apart. And you can kind of see really a little brighter yellows, a little bit brighter greens here over southeast Virginia. And if I move through time, it still tries to show that shear really increases by about 4 o'clock. You're starting to see more yellows showing up here over southeast Virginia, northeast North Carolina. And the significant tornado parameter continues to increase until about, this is at 6 o'clock this evening. Here's 7 o'clock. You're right ahead of that front. That shear really increases, and that's what's going on here. Northeast North Carolina, getting in the parts of Southeast Virginia. It's really showing that ramp up in the shear, and a little bit of instability still here about 7 o'clock, and that's about 8 o'clock this evening. So that's right ahead of the front. I mean, it's just trying to tell you there's a lot of shear with it. I don't know if there's going to be enough instability. That's the big question. How much instability and energy is there going to be right ahead of that front, and any storms ahead of the front? Are they going to be able to try to become tornadic, or are they just going to produce some strong straight line winds? This gets us into about 8, 9 o'clock this evening, and eventually all that kind of dies as it goes offshore. So still seeing a lot of that shear and some of that the winds in the atmosphere increasing right ahead of that front. And so we're still going to have to kind of keep an eye on what's going on. So kind of pulling out the local Wakefield radar kind of look here. Zooming out, you see these warnings being issued to our south, as of about, this is 2:38 this afternoon. As this stuff continues to lift north, we're just going to have to watch out for these storms as this warm air is feeding into it and see if they're able to do anything. And so we kind of talked about the risks already. We no longer have that red area, that red tornado threat of 15 to 29%. The probabilities have decreased a little bit, back down to 10 to 14% probability for everyone. We still have that hatching, which means a strong tornado is still possible. But the probability, especially inland, and I'd say, along and west of I-95, that probability really has decreased. That's where it was red earlier, and now it's been knocked down to about a 10 to 14%. But the area, especially Southeast Virginia, south and east of Richmond, and Northeast North Carolina, I think we remain in that 10 to 14% probability. Also a lower probability here over a lot of the eastern shore. So just be aware of that the probabilities have decreased there a little bit. Wind is still the main thing. We're still going to look to see how much wind we see right ahead of that front and right along that front. There's a lot of wind in the atmosphere still. So if we can pull any of that wind down to the surface, we can still get some swaths of wind damage. And so that's why the probability of straight line winds really hasn't changed that much. And we still have that hatching, suggesting that we could see winds over 70 mile per hour in some areas as everything pushes through. So we'll keep an eye on that. Looking at the simulated reflectivity, I mean, this has kind of been the problem today. It's just been so much. It's almost been too many showers and storms. And so things have really had a hard time getting organized. And so this is kind of doing a pretty decent job depicting what was going on this afternoon here about 1, 2 o'clock with showers and storms lifted northeast. They moved across Hampton Roads and up off of Eastern Shore. We've got these batches that have been coming out of North Carolina. So if I kind of step it ahead through time, this is about, let's say it's about 3 o'clock this afternoon. It tries to keep lifting this stuff out of North Carolina up into Southeast Virginia. And then we start to see maybe some storms developing to the west here ahead of that main system. We'll just have to see. The bottom line is you're not seeing a lot of individual discrete cells. It's kind of just a bunch of blob of activity everywhere. And that can actually help to decrease the severe weather threat because, all the storms are competing for the same energy. They're kind of fighting each other a little bit. So the fact that the storms have been able to kind of remain disorganized and almost like just blobs across the area has kind of helped, I think, keep things down a little bit. If we have any individual storms that can break out by themselves, those are going to be the ones to watch that maybe, try to become supercellular in nature and maybe try to produce some damaging wind or possible tornado, especially as this stuff keeps kind of streaming up out of North Carolina. So that pushes us to about 5, 6 o'clock this evening. We're still, starting to see that stuff kind of starting to push maybe a little bit further east across Hampton Roads. The models do continue to show this break in activity where, you have all this stuff feeding up out of eastern North Carolina across, south central and eastern Virginia. But then sometime later on this evening, after about 5, 6 o'clock, that stuff does start to push offshore, and then you get this break in the showers and storms, and then the actual front starts to move in from the west. Again, some models are a little bit stronger with this. This one's actually a little bit weaker. This is around 8 o'clock this evening. It could be right in the vicinity of I-95, and eventually this front kind of pushes to the coast. maybe as late as about 9 or even 10 o'clock this evening. It kind of reaches the bay, and this could still have some pretty strong winds ahead of it and right along it, but this will be the last hurrah later on this evening, and then that pushes on offshore, and then really the event's over. So it's really the fact that these storms like you're seeing here, it's just so, there's so much of it, and they're kind of blobby, and they're everywhere. It's kind of, the storms have really been kind of fighting each other all day long. So we'll just have to see really how the next several hours pan out, and if any of these storms are able to break out and do their own thing. On the left here was the depiction here right around 2 o'clock as the storms are moving across Hampton Roads. They moved out by now, and then there was more stuff across North Carolina to come up, and that's what this was showing here between 4 and 5, kind of more coverage, especially across the areas over Southeast Virginia, Eastern Virginia, and the Eastern Shore, where this stuff that's down over North Carolina is going to stream up, and it's going to be up here a little bit later on this afternoon. It's going to move offshore, and then we may get that break, and then we'll have this line coming through. Again, this may be a little bit fast. The line may not reach I-95 until 8, and it might not reach the bay until about 9. So we'll see how that plays out. The Storm Prediction Center will be updating the severe weather risk at about 4 o'clock or so this afternoon. So you'll want to check back and see if they have changed the risk at all, if they've lowered it some, see if they've kind of taken us down out of the moderate risk. So we'll see what that looks like at 4 o'clock. As far as the rainfall timing, really, obviously, nothing's really different there, so no big changes there. Wind advisories remain in effect. The winds actually increased, but then after the rain came through, the winds decreased a little bit. The winds will probably come back up again. It just kind of decreased behind those showers when the air became stable. But as the air mixes and becomes unstable again, the winds will pick back up again. So winds will kind of be up and down, I think, for the rest of the day. And right ahead of the front, the winds might really crank up. Those south winds in that dry area ahead of the front might really start to gust up. So we're going to wait this out and see what happens. Kind of what we're showing here in a lot of our forecasts, where the winds ramp up probably after about 5, 6 o'clock in a lot of areas. Right ahead of that front, you get that good south wind, maybe gusting up to 40, 45 miles an hour, maybe even some gusts up to around 50 as that front gets close. And again, the front's a little bit slower, so notice that wind doesn't shift in a lot of areas probably until after about 9, 10 o'clock. So where that cold air really starts to come in. So some of the strongest wind gusts might still be yet to come, so we'll kind of keep an eye on this really for this evening. And then overnight tonight, those winds still are expected to decrease with that west wind behind the cold front. On the marine side, again, not many changes here. The gale warnings remain in effect. We'll kind of get right into the probabilities. So everything in orange is where you have the probability for gale conditions, a good medium probability. So that's where we're still expecting the gale conditions. Winds may pick back up here a little bit more this late afternoon and evening ahead of the front. So we're just going to keep an eye on that. Again, here's your maximum wind gust. Again, from about, they really start to increase after about 3, 4 o'clock, kind of maximize between 6 and 9. And then after that front comes through, again, those marine winds will start to decrease some. Still going to be breezy, but those marine winds will decrease. So our strongest south winds look like they're going to be from, I'd say, about 4 o'clock to, let's say, about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock this evening with that south wind right ahead of that front. Kind of seeing that here in the sustained winds also. Again, those winds really increasing, I'd say, after about 3 or 4 o'clock and then lasting until about probably almost 10 to 11 o'clock. You see that with the sustained winds and also with these wind gust forecasts here. And again, once you get into a Tuesday, still a decent little west wind, small craft advisory conditions. But as we get later on Wednesday and Thursday and even into Friday, high pressure in place and not expecting nearly as much wind. So windiest time really is still going to be this afternoon and evening. Wave height, we talked about this already, basically 7 to 10 on the coastal waters, running about 5 to 6 in the bay, and your maximum wave heights anywhere from 12 to 15 feet off the coast, and probably close to 6 feet or so, 5 to 6 feet maximum on the bay there. Maybe you get some waves up to 7. So that concludes this recorded briefing. We'll have our next live and recorded briefing on Thursday.